Okay, they look down the river, and they say these fishes swimming about. Okay, so then Zhangzi, he says, see how the fish are darting about. This is the happiness of the fish. And then Huizi said, you're not a fish yourself. How can you know happiness of the fish? Okay, he has a fair point. But Zhangzi, being one of the most important philosophers in ancient Chinese history, he retorted, and you not being I, how do you know that I do not know? Right? So this is a math conversation today, and we're not going to think about deep philosophical questions like happiness of the fish. So instead, I would like to start bringing up this topic with a puzzle. This is called the Muddy Children puzzle. So let me tell you what this puzzle says, okay? Again, once upon a time, 5 children, they're children of the same family, they went to play they went out to play in the field. When they come back, 3 of them have mud on their forehead, okay? So the mother had said beforehand that, well, if you get dirty, there will be dire consequences. They each can see mud on others, but not on their own, okay? Which makes sense. You cannot see your own face. Assume that we don't have mirrors or anything like that. Okay, the father decides to say to have a little fun with this. So the father says, at least one of you has mud on your forehead. Okay, the father first makes an announcement. He says, at least one of you has mud on your forehead. And then he repeatedly asks, does any of you know whether you have mud on your own forehead? Okay, so father asks this yes or no question. So yes means I do know whether I have mud on my forehead, or no means I don't know whether I have mud on my forehead. And notice that father asks these questions repeatedly. He doesn't just ask once. Okay. And assuming all children are perceptive, intelligent, and truthful, just like all of you guys, and they all answer simultaneously. Okay, they're perceptive, intelligent, and truthful. They're not going to be telling lies. We ask what will happen, right? So the father is going to ask this question in rounds, and in every round, the children are going to simultaneously give an answer. So can you think of, you know, the situation at the puzzle, like what will actually happen? What will the children's responses be like? Okay, I'll give you maybe 30 seconds to a minute to read through this again and maybe think a little bit about this before I elaborate more on this puzzle. Okay, does this make sense? Does anybody have clarification questions? Okay, all right, let's think about this together, right? Well, my assumption was that there were 5 kids and 3 of them had mud on their foreheads. But let's simplify this question, right? Let's simplify this question to the situation that only one of them has mud on their forehead. And well, this situation is very simple because let's say assume out of 5 kids, only Esther had mud on her forehead and everybody else does not have mud on their forehead. Okay, because father made this announcement that at least one of you had mud on your forehead. So because Esther cannot see anybody else with mud on their forehead. And there must be one kid with, at least one kid with mud on their forehead, right? So Esther must know in the very first round that she has mud on her forehead. Okay, so Esther is going to say yes to father's question. Okay, what about other folks? So Balash, Sasha, Tyrell, and Ichen, they don't have mud on their forehead. So in the first round, they consider it possible that they either do or do not have mud on their forehead. Okay, so in the very first round, the kids that don't have mud on their forehead are going to say no. I don't know whether I have mud on my forehead. Only Esther is going to be able to say, yes, I do know whether I have mud on my forehead. Okay. Okay. So we all believe this? Question? Is that a question? We have assumed that she cannot see mud on her forehead. This is our assumption, right? When we do math, we have to agree with certain rules, right? It's a good point. It's a good point. Like we're not assuming mirrors. We're not assuming that Esther, they cannot be tricky, right? These kids are perceptive, intelligent, truthful, but they're not tricky. Okay, I have another question here. I'm sorry, I really cannot hear you. Can someone repeat? Let's say they also really don't like to get their hands dirty. Another question. Okay, yeah, I did say, but we're going to solve this question in progression. So with 3 kids, I really kind of I cannot wrap my head around this question. So the first thing that I do is I simplify my situation, right? I made a different assumption and I will work my way up to 3 kids. Okay, thank you. That's a very good question. Right. So in the very first round, the kids that don't have mud on their forehead are going to say, no, I don't know. And in the second round, they'll be able to say yes. Right? In the second round, everybody would know whether they have mud on their foreheads. So why is that, right? Yeah, so I think if I understand you correctly, right? They heard Esther say yes, right? So Esther was able to deduce this piece of information in the very first round. The only possible scenario is if Esther was the only kid that had mud on their forehead, right? So the other kids, they don't know. Oh, okay, they don't know in the first round, but they do know in the second round. So then if we have only one kid, then the problem is solved. This easy problem. Okay. So let's keep going. Let's complicate the situation a little bit more. Let's assume now 2 kids are muddy, right? So now let's assume, well, without loss of generality, Esther and Tyrell are the 2 kids with mud on their foreheads, right? So, so in this situation, well, from a kid that does have mud on their forehead's perspective, you're seeing exactly one other person that is muddy. And if you don't have mud on your forehead, you're seeing exactly 2 other people that are muddy, right? So this is my 2 sets of pictures are the only 2 possible perspectives. Okay, so let's think through this again. So in the first round, so you either see one person that's muddy or 2 other people that are muddy. So in the first round, everybody is going to say, what? No, I don't know. Exactly, right? Nobody knows. Why? Because in the first round, everybody considers it possible that I could have mud on my forehead or maybe I don't, right? There's not enough information to go off of this. Well, another way to think about this is that the only way for anybody to deduce anything in the first round is if you're not seeing anyone that is muddy. That is the only situation you're able to deduce anything in the first round, right? So if you're seeing someone that is muddy in the first round, you can't be able to tell anything, right? So in the first round, everybody is going to say, no, I don't know whether I have mud on my forehead. Following me so far? Good. Okay, so let's think about the second round. Butter asks, does anybody know whether you have mud on your forehead? Okay, what is going to happen in the second round? So this is getting a little bit tricky. Let's think through this. Okay, I claim that in the second round, Esther is going to be able to tell that she has mud on her forehead. And in the second round, she will be able to say, yes, I do have mud on my forehead. Okay, let's think through why. In the second round, well, Esther doesn't know yet whether she does or she doesn't have mud on her forehead. Therefore, okay, she considers it possible that she does not have mud on her forehead. So let's think Esther tries to reason the situation. First, Esther assumes that she doesn't have mud on her forehead. Okay, so in this situation, what would happen? Assuming, let's say I'm Esther, I think to myself, okay, well, assuming I don't have mud on my forehead, then what Tyrell is seeing is that nobody would have mud on their forehead. Okay. In this case, Tyrell would have been able to say something in the first round. But Tyrell didn't say anything in the first round. Tyrell said, no, I don't know. Right? So it mustn't be the case that Tyrell is seeing nobody has mud on their forehead, because Tyrell said, I don't know in the first round. Right? Therefore, in the second round, Esther is able to eliminate that possibility and tell that she is actually muddy, right? And similar reasoning goes for Tyrell, because Tyrell and Esther shares the same perspective. They both only see one other kid that is muddy. Okay, and in the second round, the kids that aren't muddy are not going to be able to say yes, right? So if you think through this yourself, you can convince yourself that in the second round, the kids that are not muddy still can consider it possible that they either do or do not have mud on their forehead. Okay, but in the third round, everybody else is going to be able to say yes, because the only way that people are going to be able to do something in the second round is that if only two kids are muddy in the second round. Only in that situation will anybody be able to deduce anything in the second round. Okay, so in the third round, everybody is going to be able to say yes, and the game ends at the third round. Okay, so far? All right, let's do it again. Let's advance our situation and say if three kids are muddy. So this was my question. Okay. All right. Now I claim that in the first two rounds, everybody is going to say I don't know. Okay. In the first two rounds, everybody is going to say I don't know. Why? Because if three kids are muddy, there are two possible perspectives. Either you can see two other kids that are muddy, or three other kids that are muddy. Okay. By previous case, the only situation when you can deduce anything in the second round or in the first round, right? Well, especially in the second round, if there exists exactly one person that is muddy, only in that situation can you deduce anything in the second round. Okay. So in the third round, because the first two rounds, nobody's going to see one person that is muddy. So in the first two rounds, nobody's going to be able to say anything. All right, let's say you can probably guess or predict what happens in the third round, right? I claim that in the third round, Esther is going to be able to say yes. Okay, let's think through why. Let's go through this reasoning once again. In the third round, Esther first assumed that she does not have mud on her forehead. Okay. If this was the case, then Esther knows that what Tyrell can see is exactly one other kid that has mud on their forehead, right? Assuming Esther is not muddy, right? So, so then Esther knows that Tyrell can only see Sasha that has mud on her forehead, right? And we know that if you're only seeing one other kid that is muddy, you'll be able to tell that you are muddy in the second round, right? But in the first 2 rounds, everybody said, I don't know, right? So therefore, that cannot possibly be the case. So in the third round, Esther will be able to say, I do have mud on my forehead. Okay? And what happens in the fourth round? In the fourth round, everybody else is going to be able to say, now I know whether I have mud on my forehead, because the only possible situation that people can say yes in the third round is exactly when there's 3 kids with mud on their foreheads, right? It's not a trivial puzzle. It's a pretty complicated puzzle. So I hope that makes sense, right? So if you want to think about it, you should think about it yourself. Okay, so it seems like there is a pattern, right? So let me pause for now. So it seems like there's a pattern, which is that if, let's say there are a bunch of kids, if it's you kids, right? Like, I don't know, maybe 30 kids. If there's 30 kids in the room and like 17 of them are muddy, right? What will happen? Well, by the similar reasoning, people are going to say, I don't know, people are going to say no, 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 no in the first 16 rounds. And in the 17th round, the kids that are muddy are going to be able to say yes in the 17th round, exactly the 17th round. And in the 18th round, everybody else is going to be able to say yes, and the game ends. So the pattern continues. Okay. So same reasoning. It doesn't matter how big the numbers are, it always goes through. So this is the answer of the puzzle. All right. Coming so far? All right. Let's think back for a second. Let's think back what Father did here, right? So Father made a statement in the very beginning. He announced publicly to all of the kids such a statement. Father said, at least one kid is muddy. Okay, let's denote the statement by P. Okay, P is a statement. P as a letter, it means a statement. Okay. All right. So it seems like there's a paradox, right? Assuming more than one kid is muddy, then the father's announcement is something that every child already knows, right? Unless there's only one kid, in which case father did tell them some non-trivial information. But if at least 2 kids that are muddy, everybody already knows that at least one kid is muddy, because everybody can already see somebody else is muddy. So father announced something that all of the kids already know, right? So what did he tell you? What did he tell you? What role did he play? It seemed like he just made a trivial statement that you already know. Why are you telling me this, right? But is it actually the case that he didn't tell me anything? He didn't tell you anything? Well, let's assume that father didn't make the statement and just start asking this question, right? If father didn't announce to you, at least one kid is muddy, and just started asking you, does anybody know whether you have mud on your forehead? If he just started saying that, asking that, well, then the first round, everybody is going to say, I don't know, right? Because it's conceivable in the first round whether I do or do not have mud on my forehead. And the second round, nothing, I don't have any more extra information to go by. So I would just keep saying, I don't know. Right? So if father didn't actually make the statement and just started asking the kids, do you know whether you're muddy? The kids are not going to be able to tell anything. So father must have told them something, right? But it's something that they already know. Why is this, right? Weird, right? Okay, so let me make it completely logical and reasonable. Let me try to convince you that father actually told you something very non-trivial. And here's my argument. I'm about to make an argument that convinces you that father actually made a very meaningful announcement. Okay? All right. So let's go back to the beginning and assume that only one kid is muddy, only one muddy kid, and say, well, in this case, it's obvious what father told you, right? What new information father gives. So in the very first round, when Esther sees all these other kids that are not muddy, Esther did not know P before father's announcement, right? So imagine these pictures before father's announcement. If Esther was the only kid that was muddy, Esther did not know P. P being the statement, at least one kid is muddy. Okay, so in this case, father definitely told them something, told Esther something. Esther could go off of father's information, right? Good, obvious, right? Okay, if two kids were muddy, then it is the case that everybody knows P, right? P being the statement that at least one kid is muddy. Why is that? Well, because if two kids were muddy, just like I said, you can actually see at least one kid is actually muddy, right? You can see, so therefore everybody can see at least one other person, well, exactly one other person. At least one other person that is muddy in this situation. So everybody knows P. Again, P being the statement that at least one kid is muddy. Okay, but now I claim that Esther does not know that Tyrell knows P. So what does this mean? It means that it is not the case that everybody knows P. Right? Let me try to convince you this. Why doesn't Esther know that Tyrell knows P? Okay, because Esther considers it possible that she is not muddy. Right? Going off of this assumption, Esther knows that Tyrell is only seeing 4 other kids that are muddy. Right? So in this case, assuming that in this hypothetical situation, by the previous slide, Tyrell does not know the fact that at least one kid is muddy. Right? So Esther imagines this possible scenario that Tyrell does not know P. Right? Because Esther considers it possible that she is not muddy. Right? Therefore, Esther does not know that Tyrell knows P, so it is not true that everybody knows P. Okay? You can see where I'm going with this. Let's look at the third case. Right? In this case, assuming that if 3 kids were muddy, it is now true that everybody knows P. Right? Not only everybody knows P, but also everybody knows that everybody knows P. Why is that? Because everybody can see at least 2 other kids that are muddy. Right? If you can see 2 other kids that are muddy, then you know that the left muddy kid can see that the right muddy kid is muddy and vice versa. Right? So in this case, it's true that everybody knows P, but now let me claim that it is not true that everybody knows P. All right, just hanging with me for a second, right? So why is that? Let me claim that Esther does not know that Tyrell knows that Sasha knows P. It's a little bit challenging to explain to you guys right now, but let me try regardless. Okay, let me claim that Esther does not know that Tyrell knows that Sasha knows P. All right, so why is that? Again, Esther considers it possible that she is not muddy, in which case Esther deduces that Tyrell is only seeing Sasha is the only other kid that is muddy. by previous case, Tyrell does not know that Sasha knows at least one kid is Muddy. Right? Therefore, in Esther's head, Esther does not know that Tyrell knows that Sasha knows P. All right. So this is as many details that I'm going to go in for this. So what is my conclusion? What is my conclusion? So let's introduce some mathematical notation here. Okay. Okay. Let's let P denote a statement. And say E of P, E parenthesize P, is going to be the statement that everybody knows P. And if I repeat this symbol E twice, the statement is going to be everybody knows that everybody knows P. Right? If I repeat E 3 times, it will be the statement that everybody knows that everyone knows that everybody knows P. And so on. So I can repeat the symbol everybody knows, like however many times I like. Right? And they're all meaningful logical statements. Okay, so let K and N be numbers. Right? So if K out of N kids were Muddy, so in my first example, K was 3 and N was 5. Right? And or you can also make, if you want, K to be 17 and N to be 30 or something, whatever number you want, as long as K is smaller than or equal to N. So if K out of N kids were Muddy, then by the similar reasoning that we just did, we know that before father's announcement, I can repeat this statement, I can repeat the phrase everybody knows K minus 1 times. Okay, but I cannot repeat it K times before father made this announcement. Right? Yeah, so if we're 3 kids, it is the case that everybody knows P, but it's not the case that everybody knows that everybody knows that everybody knows P. Right? Okay, whatever. What does this mean? But after father's announcement, what's now true? Because the father announced this publicly and everybody has seen and heard father, so now it becomes the situation that I can repeat everybody knows however many times I like, and the statement will always be true. Okay, before I could not do that. Before fathers made this announcement, I can only repeat the phrase everybody knows finitely many times. But after father's announcement, I can just say everyone knows, whatever. I can go on forever. I can spend my whole day making the statement, and the statement will still be true. Okay, so this is what father did. This is why father's announcement was not completely vacuous. Like father indeed told you something that is not known before. Okay. All right. Let me keep going with this. So, all right. If you didn't follow all of that, here's the take-home message. So in mathematical logic, right, especially in the study of what's called epistemic logic, the study of knowledge, right, logical study of knowledge, there is actually a rigorous mathematical definition for the notion common knowledge. Okay, so in mathematical logic, common knowledge is defined as following. A statement P is common knowledge is everybody knows that everybody knows that everybody knows that everybody knows everybody knows, whatever. Repeat however many times you like, P is true. Right? If you can say everybody knows however many times you like, it's always true, then this is common knowledge. Otherwise, it's not really common knowledge in a strict mathematical sense. What is the takeaway message? Well, everybody knows something is not the same as everybody knows that everybody knows something. And that is not the same as everybody knows that everybody knows that everybody knows something. Right? It seems like we're just, I don't know, like maybe you're convinced at this point that mathematicians are crazy people and why are we dealing with such business? Well, then maybe you're right. Maybe you're right. Let's compare this to everyday definition. This is a dictionary. These are the dictionary definition of common knowledge. So we have a definition from Google or a definition from Wikipedia. So in Google just says common knowledge is defined as something known by most people, Wikipedia says common knowledge is knowledge that publicly known by everyone or nearly everyone, usually refers to community, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't go on infinite, right? And that's good enough for everyday speech, right? So when we say, oh, such and such is common knowledge, right? It's common knowledge that, I don't know, French fries are tasty. I don't know if that's common knowledge. It doesn't mean that, when I say that, I don't really mean that everybody knows. It's not crazy like this, right? So when you make mathematical statements, oftentimes it's different than a statement made in everyday life. Let me give an example, right? So, well, Halloween is coming up. You can go out and trick or treating, right? So it's commonly understood that when you say the statement trick or treat, you're picking one, right? If you don't give me a treat, I'm going to trick you. Otherwise, if you give me a treat, I will not trick you. That is a common assumption, right? But to a mathematician's mind, trick or treat, it could mean one of the two is true, or it could mean both is true. It's still trick or treat if I both trick and treat, right? Like if I get your treat and also trick you, that's perfectly fine. That is also trick or treat. But you're probably a very mean kid if you did both, right? So this is in one sense that when we make a mathematical statement, like these logical statement, it's oftentimes different than in the logical sense, if the statement is made in the logical sense. Okay, so let me tell you a joke. This is a good time to tell you a joke at this point. And if you find this joke funny, well, I don't know, you probably would find being a mathematician the right path of life. So let me try to tell this joke out, see if you find it funny. The joke goes like this. So a group of mathematicians go into a restaurant and they sit down at the table. And a waiter comes and asks this group of mathematicians, would any of you like a cup of water? Okay, the waiter asks, would any of you like a cup of water? You've all heard this question, right? If you're eating at a restaurant, okay? So the first mathematician raised their head and they said, I don't know. The second mathematician, after hearing the first mathematician, raised their hand and said, I don't know. The third mathematician heard the second mathematician and raised their hand and said, I don't know. Okay, so everybody just said, I don't know, to waiter's question. Until the very last mathematician. The very last mathematician just said, no. All right, nobody find that joke funny. Should I explain the joke? It will kill the joke. Do you want me to explain the joke? You got it? Yes? You want me to explain the joke? Okay, I'll explain the joke. Maybe after I explain the joke, you'll find it funny. So what was waiter's question? Okay, the waiter's question was, does anybody want a cup of water? You want a cup of water? Okay, do you have a question? Oh, I asked, no, I didn't ask you if you want a cup of water. Oh, right, the waiter's question, we're imagining if we were in the restaurant, the waiter's question was, does anybody want a cup of water? Right? The first question said, I don't know, because the first mathematician said, I don't know, because the first mathematician could only know whether they want a cup of water. Like, it's not possible for them to know whether the rest of the group knows if anybody wants a cup of water, right? So they're being truthful. They don't know. They can't speak for other people, right? Because the first mathematician does not know whether any of the rest of the mathematicians want a cup of water. So the first mathematician just said, I don't know. because they can't speak for the rest of the other mathematicians. Does that make sense now? Right. And the very last mathematician, hearing everybody else said mathematician, said no because, well, they don't know. And then if the very last mathematician didn't want a cup of water, they can say no on behalf of the entire group. Okay. Okay. So I don't know. So maybe now I fully convinced you that mathematicians are crazy people that you should stay with. Maybe that's true, but I hope not. All right. So I just want to make this statement, right? So common knowledge. So in my slide, I mean common knowledge by the definition of its logical, in the logical sense, right? Common knowledge, if I define as something that everyone knows, that everyone knows, that everyone knows, and everyone, and so on, right? Common knowledge or lack thereof is desirable in different scenarios of everyday life. So let's think through this. Why do we want such a seemingly crazy mathematical notion of common knowledge? Here's an example. When you write an email, you have these fields that you can fill in your recipient list, right? You can either, let's say if I want to send an email to a group of people, I can either copy them or blind copy them. And let's say that I want to send them something that they should know, send them a piece of knowledge, piece of information. Dinner is at 6 p.m. at my house, right? Okay, so if I copied everyone instead of blind copied everyone, everybody could see everybody's emails or names, right? So assuming everybody checks their emails, then if I copied everyone, I created a situation where common knowledge is achieved. Right? So if I can see, oh, you're coming, and if you can see that he's coming, then everybody knows, like on this list, these people are coming, or at least these people are informed, right? On the other hand, if you blind copy your recipient list, well, it is the case, logically speaking, objectively speaking, within this group of people, it's possible that, again, assuming everybody checks their email, everybody knows dinner is at 6 in my place, right? But if I blind copied such an email, it's not the case anymore that everybody knows this is the case. So it makes a difference, right? So in this case, we're implicitly using it in everyday life, but we just don't realize it. Okay? So here's a situation that we can choose whether to deliver common knowledge or block common knowledge from being achieved. What's this? It's a stop sign. What does it mean? Stop. I mean, stop. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So in this case, everybody should know what a stop sign means. And it should be the case that everybody knows what the stop sign should mean. And it should be the case that everyone knows what a stop sign should mean, right? So imagine the situation that if I pull up at a crossing and you pull out a crossing, I don't have a stop sign, but you do, right? It's not enough for me to know what a stop sign means. I must also know or be confident enough to assume that you also know what a stop sign means. So important for me to know that you know, right? So it's not enough for everybody to know what a stop sign means. It's also important for everybody to know that everybody else knows what a stop sign means, and so on, right? So in this case, common knowledge is definitely absolutely desired, right? The third situation, this is kind of a generic example, right? In games, oftentimes we want to block common knowledge for it to be interesting, right? Let's say I draw a bunch of cards. And typically when you play a card game, I don't want to show you my hand, right? I don't want what's in my hand to become common knowledge, right? And that's what makes the game interesting. We brought common knowledge, and we have a lot of games that relies on this notion. And I know maybe you've played, there's a very nice co-op game called Hanabi. It's a co-op game. I don't know if you played it. Like, it relies on people communicating to each other information that they know for the group to collectively make a good decision, right? So by playing with how much people know, we can create interesting games. All right, so let's see how much time I have. So I have 4:15. Let me just kind of go quickly my next example. So here's another famous problem. It's called two generals problem. Okay, so before I introduce the story, let me just tell you the moral of the story, rather. So in certain situations, common knowledge is indeed desired, but sometimes because of circumstances, it's impossible to achieve, right? This is going to be an illustration of such a scenario. So let me introduce the famous two generals problem. This has a very important role in studies, for example, in computer networks, right? When we study two processes communicating to each other. So two general problems go as follows. So we have two generals. They're on the same side, General A and General B. They each sit on a different side of a hill, surrounding a valley where the enemies dwell. Okay, and General B would like to coordinate on the time to attack these enemies simultaneously, right? And they must really attack simultaneously for them to win. They know that if only one of them attacked and the other one didn't, they're bound to lose. It's guaranteed that they will lose. But if they attack simultaneously, they would win, right? But they didn't agree on a time beforehand. They would need to communicate to each other what time they would attack, and this time would need to be agreed upon, and both parties would need to be absolutely certain, right, that they have to attack simultaneously, right? Imagine this as a very high stake battle. Imagine like the enemies are aliens and generals are, representing humanity, and if they lose, humanity dies, right? So and the only way that they can communicate to each other is by sending messengers passing through the enemy's field, right? Think about it as not modern day wars or battles. Like, think about it as old timey, like 300 BC, John's time, right? Ancient Chinese philosopher time. They have to actually literally physically send messengers from one side to another side and vice versa. We're not limiting the number of messengers that each party can send, and they can send as many as they want, but they cannot guarantee, this is very important, they cannot guarantee that their messages are delivered, right? Because there's enemies in the middle. A messenger must go through the enemy's territory in order to reach the other general, and this messenger might get attacked, in which case it results in failure of delivery of the message. Does that make sense? Okay, so in this situation, common knowledge among these two generals is highly desired. These two generals would really like to make sure that they agree on the same time to attack, and I would need to know that you would need to know that I know, and vice versa. We need common knowledge in the strict logical sense. Okay, but can it actually be achieved? Okay, so let's say General A is the more important general, and A designates a time, let's say attack at 16 o'clock on September 17th, right? So let's say General A sends General B this message. The messenger goes through enemy's field. So after General A sends this message, is A confident to attack, right? A is not confident to attack because A does not know if the message is delivered, right? If the messenger dies, in the enemy field, it would never reach B. So General A would attack by themselves, and the war or battle would end up in failure, right? So after A sends this message, even if it's successfully delivered, A is still not confident to attack because A does not know, right? Okay, so now assuming B gets this message. So at this moment, both parties would actually know that this is a time. Is that a question? You have a question? Okay, the question was if General B sends A message saying that I got your message. Now are they confident? It seems like maybe they are. Let me argue otherwise. Okay, so let's say in the lucky situation that B gets A's message. Okay. But now B considers it possible that A does not know that B knows when to attack. Right? Because from A's perspective, A just sent this message. A doesn't know if, let's say if, well, this is, I guess, before B sends, okay, I got it, right? Like, A is, okay, B considers it possible that A does not know B knows when to attack. Right? Does that make sense? So, I mean, it's a bit tricky to wrap your head around this. But if B considers it possible that A does not know that B knows when to attack, then the blue part will result in the fact that A will not attack, right? So if A does not know that B knows when to attack, which is what B considers possible, then A will not attack, right? Because, yeah. All right, so let's say B sends A this message. After B sends A this message, B does not know if B's message gets actually delivered, right? So after B sends this message, B knows the time to attack, but B needs to make sure that A knows that B knows, right? Therefore, B wants to send A a message. But after B sends this message, B doesn't know if A has gotten her message. Okay, so if B considers it possible that A will not attack, then B will not attack. All right, so I guess I need to wrap up soon. So let me just quickly go over this. So yeah, so you can kind of convince yourself that what A can do is that A can send B an acknowledgement of acknowledgement, assuming that what the message that B sends A is successful, I guess. Yeah, so let me just quickly go through. I actually have, okay, let me just skip this part. I'll give you a formal reasoning why this is not possible, right? So the idea is that you can send messages back and forth each other, but after I send this message, I don't know if my message is delivered. It would require the other party to send me another message to confirm. But if the other party sends another message, then they don't know if their message is delivered. And then so you always have to go back and forth. So this process, you can imagine it will go on infinite, right? You need acknowledgement of acknowledgement of acknowledgement. And it will just go on infinite. So here's the yeah. let me just give you an actually rigorous mathematical proof that this is not achievable. Common knowledge, the two generals cannot assure that they are both certain to attack at the same time, like within finite number of messages. Okay. Did you? Okay, you guys have a question. Maybe let me take this one last question. What's the question? So the question was, why can't they make a smoke signal? That's a very good question, but you probably should grow up to be an engineer instead of a mathematician, because engineers think about these actually practical solutions, but mathematicians work with hypothetical assumptions, right? Our assumption was that the only way for these two generals to communicate among each other is to send sodium messenger. That's the only way. They cannot send smoke signals. Yeah, so let me just convince you once and for all, right? So it seems like B can send you an acknowledgement, and then they would both know. But let me try to convince you otherwise, right? So assuming that this was indeed possible, assuming that they can exchange finitely many messages, and at some point, both of them are definitely certain that they can attack, assuming this is possible. Okay, so before I make this argument, I would like to point out a fact that certainty works in the way that if I am certain, then you must be certain, right? It cannot possibly be the case that I am certain, but you're not, right? So if you're not certain, you might not attack. If I am certain, I will attack, but this will result in us failing, right? So if I'm certain, that means you're certain, and if you're certain, vice versa, or we're both uncertain. It can't be the case that one is certain and the other is not, right? So let's just suppose that the other case, to the contrary, that after the delivery of message M, both generals are certain to attack. But they're not sure before this very message is delivered. So M was the last message that gets delivered that made both generals to be certain, right? So then the receiver of this very last message that gets delivered decides not to attack before it is delivered, but decides to attack after it is, because we assume that M is a message that made this difference. M is a message that made everybody certain, right? So the receiver of M must have received this message that changed his mind from being uncertain to being certain, right? Okay. So now take a mental note that the receiver of this last message M will not attack before this message was delivered. Okay. But now let's think about this from the sender's perspective. Okay, so from the sender's perspective, the sequence of delivered messages is exactly the same before and after the delivery of M. Because after the message M is sent by the sender cannot tell if the message is delivered, right? So as far as the sender is concerned, before and after the delivery of M, the sequence of delivered messages is exactly the same, right? So therefore, before and after delivery of M, it doesn't make any difference for the sender, right? So if after M is delivered, the sender was confident to attack, then before M was delivered, the sender must also have been confident to attack, right? So now we reach a contradiction, which is before M is delivered, the receiver was not confident to attack, but the sender was. So therefore, we reach a contradiction because, as I said in the very beginning, you can either both be certain or both be uncertain. We cannot have a situation that I am certain that you're uncertain, because that's just not what being certain means, right? My being certain implies that you're certain and vice versa. But we've created a situation that one party is certain and the other party is not certain, right? So just a remark. So why do we care about this, right? So if you read about or hear about computer networks, they're actually, one computer might want to send a message to another computer, and this happens all the time. And sometimes we would like the transmission of message to be relatively secure, right? I would like to make sure that you've received my message. How can I make sure, right? And then in real life, transmission of messages on computer networks is an unreliable channel, right? Your Wi-Fi might go out. When you send a message, there's no guarantee that a priori the sender will not know that this message will be delivered a priori, right? So therefore, what computer network engineers come up with that's considered a secure protocol is what's called transmission control protocol. Actually implements a three-way handshake, where processor 1 sends processor 2 a message, processor 2 acknowledges it, and the processor 1 acknowledges the acknowledgement, and then we're done. It's called a TCP/IP three-way handshake. That's what computers actually do, right? So in this situation, it's not possible that by this mathematical proof to achieve common knowledge, but as far as engineers are concerned, it's good enough for us to have the three-way handshake, to be confident enough that we can keep talking, in the computer network, and that is considered a secure protocol. So that is the two generals problem, and also like very. Oh, sorry, I'm 2 minutes over time. So consider very important in studying reasoning about knowledge. So I will just skip all of the actual math, and then just say that abstract possible worlds. Well, abstract reasoning on knowledge is actually very useful in practice. Like if you consider artificial intelligence, you want to make self-driving cars, right? Self-driving cars need to know that, they need to know that what a stop sign means, they need to think about reasoning about knowledge, and it's very much useful in real life. All right, thank you very much. Sorry, I'm 2 minutes over time. That is the end of my talk.